Another nugget of wisdom today, as opposed to a pearl of wisdom. So we will continue the pearls next week. And it's about the 9 deadly sins that destroy relationships and how you can redeem them. Uh, the thing about a sin is it isn't about just stop doing it. It really is about redeeming yourself. Once you've committed that sin, you can't just not have sin. It's occurred. It calls you to be proactive and take the effort to bring about that redemption. That's a very important aspect to remember about, and why it is 9 deadly sins. It's not mistakes, and we're talking about deadly sins. Like, what is death? It is literally, a life. Let's start with what is life. Life is just a state in which an organism is breathing. And that state can switch and become a state where the organism stops breathing, at which point it's dead. It's a state of death. So the 7 deadly sins of relationship, any one of them can actually change the state of life in a relationship to completely destroying it, so that there is no life at all. So it's quite important. I'm not talking about mistakes that people make. I'm talking about, I've really been given these 9, as each one of them has the ability to completely change the state from life to death in a relationship. So some of them are quite obvious, and we sort of know them. But then to look at them from a deadly sin perspective actually gave me a different perspective. In terms of, gave me an ability to engage with it in some depth. So the first one is all about taken for granted. Now we all know this, how irritating it is when we get taken for granted. Now, as a deadly sin, when I examine this taken for granted, what actually happens when we get taken for granted? In a relationship or a relating context, there is such a focus on doing when you're taken for granted, that it's as if you can't get a word in. It's like it's expected of you. And we go through all forms of emotions, like feeling feeling that the other person is entitled in some way. And also, there are a whole host of domino type things that just start dropping in a relationship. And it starts heading very fast towards a train wreck. There is such a focus on doing in a relationship that both parties sometimes become even revengeful. And I'm saying both parties. Sometimes it's you're relating to a bigger group of people. It could be to a family, or it could be to a team. The same thing happens. When you take them for granted, there's such a focus on doing, or complete focus on not doing. This person should have done this. I'm not going to go step into it. But the focus and emphasis is on doing. Now, when you get into the busyness of doing, you are to interrupt that pattern. So the redemption of being taken for granted is acceptance with love. If you feel somewhere something should have been done and it isn't, or if you feel somewhere where you had not committed to something, and the other person is completely expecting you to do it, you feel taken for granted. This is the point you go into. Okay, this is what the situation is. But rather than do it with resentment, do it as an acceptance with love. We so often accept without love. And a lot of the time, when you accept something without love, it gives you that vibe that you have when you feel taken for granted. Now, what does acceptance with love actually do? It unleashes the freedom to simply be. And the being returns. You can choose to be in your strength. You can choose to be in your clarity. You can choose to be who you really are as a human, which is love. And then have a communication or a conversation to turn around the taken for granted scenario. Each one of you will have your own examples of where you felt taken for granted. I'm not actually going to share an example with this one here, because I just want you, rather than engaging with my story on this, to allow your own thinking to go where you have felt taken for granted. For me, it was very fascinating to choose one situation where I felt taken for granted and discover that, aha, I felt taken for granted. I sort of wrote off that relationship, but actually, what was going on was I just focused on doing. And what I did was walk away. I was doing the walking away from that situation. Did it solve anything? It didn't. Did it make matters worse? Well, I don't know what it did for the other person, but it certainly got me into becoming an addict of doing, doing, doing. Because I didn't like that feeling of being taken for granted. And it felt like I was pushed into stuff, which I didn't like at all. So rather than feel my feelings, I started becoming numb to them. And the more I engaged in doing and I mastered winning the do race, the further away I went from the being of who I am. And further away, what I wanted to have started going further and further away from me. There was no acceptance of that situation. That was only about being right. And that in itself has a payoff, yes. Momentarily I felt, well, F you, I'm moving on. But actually, it was very depleting. And it was acceptance with love. I don't have to go and share that with anyone. I know what occurs when I do acceptance with love. It literally unleashes me, gives me the freedom to be, opens that doorway to a freedom to be, and then I could choose my B word. And I chose to be miraculous, focusing my attention on what's making my heart sing. Now, that has been instrumental in transforming many relationships. Sometimes you actually are not in a physical presence of the relationship at all. It's been over and done with a long time ago. But when you have this taken for granted deadly sin parked somewhere in your field, because it's a deadly sin, it gets activated very fast when another situation occurs where you're taken for granted, where whatever it is that you might have walked away from in the past just rises and starts taking you off into a do race. And you disconnect from having that unleashment, having that freedom to be. So examine for yourself as you redeem yourself from this deadly sin. When you are, when you accept without love, just because you have to, or just as a compromise, how does that feel? What kind of experience is that? That's what the taken for granted deadly sin is about. Instead, if you choose to consciously apply acceptance with love, see what unleashing it does for you. As a redemption to taken for granted, it will unleash the freedom to be. Now, to anchor it in your reality, look at situations in the past. Find one or two areas, and you really don't need more than one, actually. I mean, because I found such a huge insight in examining this from one of the old relationship where I felt taken for granted, that I learned that, okay, the redemption of that was acceptance with love. Taken for granted, when we allow it to carry on, we are accepting that without love. So let's look at the second deadly sin. The second deadly sin is indulging in blame. So often, I mean, relating itself so often becomes one where blame is like just waiting to happen. And it could be something happened, like I've sprained my left ankle, and it happened yesterday. Um, so there I am, climbing up the stairs because there was a meeting that I was in. It lasted a little bit longer than it should have, and I had a treatment that was booked. So I was rushing up the stairs, and I'm feeling very light. So it was like, yeah, I can actually run up the stairs. So I'm now, instead of running up the stairs and enjoying the run up the stairs, I'm actually rushing. I added the rush energy to it, and I tripped, and literally like a little tennis ball developed on the left ankle. Um, and, and at that point, there was such an adrenaline rush. I didn't feel any pain. I went ahead and did the treatment. And when I came out, it was like in a really bad state, needed attention. I very easily I could have gone into, like, when my niece is here with me, and there were a couple of other people, and they were like, they should have told you that you shouldn't have done this treatment. Blame conversations begun there. And I was like, well, I don't think anybody really had any chance to make any input to me, because I had to come back. I was leading, an inspired leaders session with 25 leaders. So I had to be back. I wasn't going to listen to anyone. I was just going to get on with the treatment and come straight back. So I don't think, even if they told me, I would have taken any notice. But I realized that I was actually like starting to justify blame that somebody else was engaging in. And anybody would say, okay, well, that's justified, and it was, to me, what it did at that point, I just reacted to that blame, and I said that, I don't think they could have made any difference, because I was so much on a mission to get this done and come back and get on and lead the program I was doing. What I realized was, when you engage in blame, or someone else engages in blame, and you get into justification, you yourself have taken on the blame energy. There's a part of you that's starting to think, that, oh, maybe this blame is justified. Oh, no, it isn't justified. But you're like adopting that blame energy. Now, what does that do? What's the redemption to blame? The redemption to blame is really playing the game that you are about in your life, or in that particular moment. Like, everything I do, I'm engaged in the game that is the game for my life. expecting and accepting miracles being the norm for humans and humanity. So, I'm able to just go straight into that space. How does this conversation serve that? It didn't. What is the point of having this conversation? Who else could I have blamed? The meeting that overran, or the fact that um, I blame myself that I actually chose to fit a treatment in when I really only had half an hour to do such a big program that I was leading. So think about it in terms of relationships. And I call it an indulgence, because it is an indulgence in blame. You are literally beating down your own vital life force by literally trashing whatever choices and decisions you've made. The important thing to get is when someone else is engaged in blame, if you get into a justification, you are buying into that blame. You are off your game. You're off your game. That's the most important thing to remember. And that's why this indulging in blame is a deadly sin. And its redemption is reconnecting to the game that you're playing, as opposed to justifying why you should or should not have. So there you're still in the blame. In doing this nugget of wisdom, if you just get that redemption isn't to go and elaborate on or justify or explain the deadly sin choice that you might have got involved in inadvertently, it literally is doing what the redemption is actually about. Taken for granted, engage with acceptance, with love. It automatically unleashes your freedom to be. Indulging in blame rather than notice it, you just notice it, that's it. And step into what your game is. If you don't have a very specified game, as a human, you have been gifted with the gift of life. Your game is to come alive. How does justifying, or explaining or elaborating on why you should or should not have blamed something or someone, how is that making you come alive? It does nothing. It's literally just fluff, empty fluff. Does nothing. The third one is giving your power away to the relationship. Giving your power away to the relationship. I feel so happy when I'm in this relationship. You make me so happy. Or it could be, because of you, I've, I just feel so anxious because of the choices and decisions you make. You cause so much worry to me. Well, just get that nobody takes your power away. Just nobody does, and nobody can. You are the conscious light expression of the Creator. Who can take that power away? Nobody can. So the redemption, and you can see why, giving your power away to the relationship, we think the other person feels really good when we say, oh, you make me so happy. I feel happy when I'm with you. It's a very different expression to you make me so happy. Now, the redemption to this is empowering the relationship with your power, right? Really owning the power that is you. The thing to remember is you are that conscious light of the Creator. You're born with a very innate and unique magnificence. There is a human disguise to that. And the vibration of being human is love, doing human causes a variety of fractures. And giving your power away in a relationship is you fracturing the human form, the human disguise from the inside out. And really, what you're doing here is by always giving your power away is always a matter of conscious choice. It is a conscious choice. Like people say, well, I can't help it. I mean, I'm hypnotized by this person. They just do something to me, Well, the first step is a conscious choice. And then you can maybe get mesmerized and just go towards a train wreck situation. The key thing here is keep that power. You know, you're the only one who has the power to make you happy. You are the only one who has the power to feel that sense of self-worth and dignity. Nobody can take it away and nobody can give it to you. The redemption here is empowering the relationship with your power. You give permission to yourself to receive the enrichment from this interaction. Even if that interaction is, devastating, it can still give you several insights that will enrich you. I was like so taken by this understanding that's like, my God, these are deadly sins. Just one of these is a deadly sin. And when I was looking at some of the relationships that, from the past that no longer exist, and I don't even have any charge or anything, but just for me to implement this work, I implement this stuff before I share anything with you. And I do exactly what I'm asking you to do for myself. So when I picked this up and I examined some of those relationships, it's like, wow, how it is a sliding door moment. You give your power away to a relationship rather than redeem that power that you've given away by empowering the relationship with your powers. It's a sliding door moment. You make me so happy. I feel delighted when I see you operating like this. It's very different. Your language is an expression of whether a deadly sin is on or off. A very simple, small example, and I'm using my grandkids because it's like sometimes you just can't help yourself there. So, there are moments where one of them has a tantrum. And I had the privilege of being caught in this tantrum storm with my elder grandchild once, and it was in Berlin. So I went to pick him up from his nursery, and I'm coming back, and we are walking back, and I decided to take the path through the woods because Berlin actually is quite rich in woods and lakes and stuff. So I'm taking the path through the woods, and the tantrum begins. And he's going through his terrible too. So the tantrum is like, there's no reason for it. And then what happens is when he began the tantrum, after a while, he just got so caught up in it, he didn't know how to get out of it. And I'm like desperately trying to help this kid, not interested in it. This is where, my happiness now is at the beck and call of this child who's having a tantrum. Now, he's in a buggy and he wants to walk. And I know that this child runs. This is we are in the woods, there's a lake. I'm really not comfortable getting him out of the buggy and him running because I can't really run as fast behind him or anything like that. So I'm not good. I don't want to get him out of the buggy. People around me come And they're looking at me thinking I'm doing something to this kid where he's screaming so much. And then they realize I'm not actually, I'm just talking sense to him. And this child is now caught in the grip of his tantrum. And they attempt to talk to the child in German because I just thought maybe he's not understanding me in English. And he just screams in their face, like so embarrassing. Oh my God. And that was a moment, it was like, okay, this is my joy of being a grandma is rapidly being destroyed right now. I'm making certain decisions that I'm never ever going to, think it's going to be one of those wonderful breezy afternoons where I can go for a walk through the woods with my grandkid. But there is this risk of this tantrum. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm blaming this 2-year old like the taking away the joy of me being a grandma. And that was a point where I said, okay, I'm going to empower this relationship with my powers. And I just actually left the buggy there and I walked towards a tree. And the tree was such that I could just shake it. I just shook it and it had lots of like bunches of some kind of fruits and they started falling. And it also actually had lots of birds and they started just flying and it broke the pattern of this tantrum. So the child was able to step away from it. And then he started laughing, and we both had a great laugh, and it was wonderful. I still didn't need to take him out of the buggy. We just enjoyed it there. But at that point, if I had continued where I was going with this, giving my power away to this relationship, which is the power of my enjoyment of being a grandma, to this, I mean, God knows what other decisions I would have made, and really actually destroyed my ability to enjoy being a grandma. And I may never have gone back for the birth of my second grandkid. So many things could have occurred. And when I thought about, I mean, I'm just illustrating this example to you because it's so vivid and visual. But you will see you yourself would have situations where you've given your power away to in a relationship in the past. And it has had a knock-on effect throughout the rest of your life. The key thing is, whatever may have occurred in the past, you can still empower your memory of that relationship with your own powers by really applying the redemption even now. After all, you are the creator of how your life turns out. There's so much to say about every deadly sin, and I'm very conscious of the time, and we are only on number 4. Just wave, Catherine, if I'm going too deep. So the 4th one is harboring regret. Now, how does this deadly sin show up? This one is a killer. Regret is a killer. There's nothing you can do about it. Even the use of the word regret kills you. It's like the innate vibration of regret it's like a killing machine. It's a slow killing machine. It's that. And we harbor regret in relationships. That may be like, there's someone that I work very closely with. And it was in my first job that I had in England. And she was a new person who joined us as an intern. And I remember the first time she came in, the first date that she came in, I was also quite new. I was about a week, I had joined a week before she did. The first day she came in, and she's had very high qualifications and stuff and had a great air about herself. She came in and we were all getting ready for the weekly Monday morning team meeting. And she says hello to people and nobody responds because everybody's like really engaged. in it, and she goes and sits down, and the blame starts first of all, um, over lunch. But she couldn't talk to anyone else because nobody really engaged with her. She talks to me a little bit. The next day she comes in, and this time she's very loud in her good morning. This is we are in England. We are in this very conservative organization. This level of loudness, it was not appreciated. So she didn't get any reaction or response either. Um, Now, this happened 2 or 3 times. And then I noticed that this woman, who was like, she really had the joie de vivre about her when she began. And very soon she started going into a shell. And then we got allocated to different teams that didn't really have that much to do with her. I moved on in my career, and we met at a conference. This was like several years later. And she was like a waif of her previous self that I remember. She was still in that same job. And I asked her, wow, are you still there? How come? Is it going well? And she just was talking about so many things that happened that she just compromised on. She tolerated. She was really harboring regret at having made the choice to take up this job. And I said, but 3 years later, you're still there. Why don't you just move? She goes, well, I can't, I've got so many um, uh, liabilities that I've now taken on, because there are all these perks that come with the job. I regret it, but I'm dependent on it. So it was like she was going down this spiral of now feeling completely dependent on this. So there is great blame that is there, giving the power away to a relationship with this job. But 4 years later, I heard that she actually had crossed over. She was young, very young. And then somebody was saying that she got so trapped into that she wasn't getting the pension that she should have got. Well, she was in her mid-30s. What's she worrying about pension for at that age? It was this harboring of regret after regret after regret after regret, and still staying in a place that gave her, was always disempowering her, really marked the death of her. And this is like a very stark story that I'm talking about. I often illustrate this example by when I'm training people on how to separate the facts from meaning. She made it mean that people were ignoring her. She made it mean that people were being mean to her. She made it mean then later that she just wasn't worth being taken, being noticed. She made it mean that she was unemployable by anyone else. So whilst she was, and she regretted that she didn't choose earlier to move on, and she made it mean that her judgment was flawed in some way. And that just kept leading her towards her own demise. If instead she had just noticed the fact that, okay, there's a team meeting happening in 5 minutes, and everything isn't about you, you've come in, you've said hello, people are busy, and 5 minutes later there's a team meeting, unconditionally accepted what is, the whole experience of life would have been different. So the redemption to harboring regret is unconditional acceptance of what is. Until the moment you notice regret in any area of your life, immediately go into understanding what are the various components that make up this regret, and unconditionally accept what is, because that is what gives you the freedom to move forward. I mean, this whole fact versus meaning, perhaps we'll do another session on that another time. It really helps you to get to an unconditional acceptance of what is. But even if you can't find a way of getting unconditional acceptance, do it just as a redemption so that you can move forward. The fifth deadly sin that destroys a relationship is unsaid communication. One unsaid communication, this is the ratio, guys. One unsaid communication results in at least 100 unfulfilled expectations. So this ex-colleague of mine that I'm talking about, you can imagine how many hundreds of thousands of unfulfilled expectations she was burdening herself with. Because every communication of hers that she really would have loved to say was unsaid. A number of times people use the language, well, I don't really, it doesn't bother me. I don't really bother saying this. What's the point? Well, it's, you can choose that. It may not show up there, but you've got that ratio activated. So now your unfulfilled expectation journey has begun. And all that you're going to get is more and more and more evidence of unfulfilled expectations all the way around. Now, sometimes, people that you might have had unsaid communication with, they are no more. Or you can't even get hold of them. So what do you do about that? You purge the unsaid communication out of your system. You purge it by writing down all the unsaid communications with the different people that you have held within you. So that within your system, you have fully expressed everything that you wanted to say. You can, of course, communicate with the other person's higher self. But even if you don't understand what that is, you can at least write down all the unsaid communications that you have. It may be with your mother, with your father, with your caretaker, with an ex previous boss, ex relationships, children, wherever. So when I experience unfulfilled expectations starting to rise within me, I immediately go into, where do I have unsaid communication? And now, I just pick up the phone or do a WhatsApp message asking to speak to the person if the person is available. If not, I do the purging. You write down all the unsaid communications until there's nothing more that's coming through. Apply the energy of the elements. Put the sheet of paper in a pan. You burn it. You apply the energy of fire. Fire destroys, and it transmutates to a new state. And the state that you're transmutating into is communication with love. That is the redemption of this. Now, once the whole thing is burnt, you add water to it, applying the energy of water, which washes away the debris and brings flow. Put that water and ash into the soil. You will feel a lightness. You'll feel your lungs open up. You may even start coughing because the stickiness that was, constricting your lungs wants to release that mucus, and it's all fine. I've seen this happen number of times. Now, the redemption of unsaid communications is communicating with love. This ratio, if you remember this, that one unsaid communication results in at least 100 unfulfilled expectations. So if you're experiencing unfulfilled expectations, that cycle has begun. Your ratio is activated. Go find where there is unsaid communications. Communicate with love. A number of times we communicate without love. What does communicating without love looks like? Even something like, your child might have gone out somewhere and you're saying, this, you always cause me so much worry and I'm really anxious about this. Well, you're actually wanting to protect the child and you're communicating without love. So what does it do? The child basically pushes you away and then actually starts to not even say where he or she is going because it doesn't want to be receiving your barrage of anxiousness. Instead, you can share with love that, you really care and you feel concerned about his or her safety. Is there something that he can do or she can do to alleviate that concern? And you can arrive at a way of communicating rather than not saying anything, but actually feeling that anxiousness within you because you don't want the child to push you away, but they push you away nonetheless because unfulfilled expectations start to kick in. They feel your anxiety even if you don't communicate it. I mean, if you work with pets and if you work with horses or dogs, they pick up on unsaid communications because your vibe is different to them. And they have a very lovely way in which they have you turn it around by showering you with so much love and loyalty, despite whatever it is that you may be experiencing, the redemption occurs. You're communicating with love. What if you actually communicated with love wherever you have unsaid communications? Doesn't mean you suddenly are going to become super pally with that person, but you've at least communicated with love, whatever it is that is to communicate. And if the other person is not there, do the purging. The sixth deadly sin that destroys relationship: holding the other person responsible. Like, I have seen so many relationships destroyed when one party holds the other person responsible for something that has not occurred for them. I supported you in your studies so that you could have a career. And now I don't have a life. You're off doing your work. I hear this a lot of the times, particularly from women who keep saying, I've sacrificed so much. And he's off doing his work, earning the money and all of that. You didn't have to do that. You chose to do it. So the redemption, when you hold the other person responsible, the redemption is taking accountability for your own part and having an accountability conversation. This is what you can count on me to do. This is what you cannot count on me to do. This is what I want to count on you to do. Do you accept this? This whole responsibility, holding the other person responsible, depletes your ability to respond. And therefore, when you have this depletion of your ability to respond, it starts to break down the relationship. I mean, there's a particular situation that I picked up with somebody that I've been working with, and she went through a series of abuse from a family member in her childhood. It's a pretty dire situation, and even to this day, holds her mother responsible for having introduced this person to her. And for not protecting her. The mother did not know at all what was going on. She wasn't aware of it, only became aware of it very recently and has taken some significant actions. But this woman, she's, quite mature in her early 50s now, continued to hold her mother responsible. So she never had a relationship with her mother. She always felt unprotected. Can you imagine how many choices and decisions and judgments and evaluations she formed about people throughout her life, the effect it had on her own relationship with her own children? As a mother, she became overprotective. So the kids feel smothered all the time. Her husband feels smothered all the time. Now, when she took accountability for the joy, finding joy in her own life, she was able to go back and restore joy in each of those relationships. And she realized that she had given her power away to this particular happening that had taken place when she was very young. It's as if that happening was the one that was actually running the show of her life and depleting her ability to come alive. And there was all this blame she was attributing for that incident to her mother. And then she was like she confessed she was like a blame making machine. Anything would occur, she was just ready to blame. It's as if she would go into a relationship, she would go into a project and immediately start creating a collection of people and situations to continue to blame. Sorry, the lights have gone off, so I look the way I look, but it's just the computer light that is shining on me. So holding the other person responsible rather than the redemption here is taking accountability for your own part. Now, if you operate from an accountability point of view throughout your life, you are vigilant, you are present, you become appreciative of your own efforts as well as that of others. Your ability to respond is fine-tuned, and you have that lightness of being about you ongoingly. The seventh deadly sin, I had no idea that this was actually a deadly sin. It is listening through a filter. We create filters automatically. It's like such a natural and normal thing that occurs with people. Like I use the example, if I was to say, hello, I'm Mynoo Maryel, and I'm a politician, boom, your listening filter of a politician will come down. And from that point on, whatever it is that I say, you will listen to me through that filter. And we do this in relationships all the time. And we do this, and often it is related to a previous association that we might have had with the person, how they might have behaved in the past, or it may be to do with how we have related to people in that kind of a category. Like, people have listening filters of interns, or listening filters of single women, or listening filters um, of husbands, just because it's something that they've chosen to take on. But the other person does not get a chance. It destroys the relationship. It literally kills the relationship if you continue listening through a listening filter. Redemption is receiving the communication. So you can notice that a filter is coming on. How do you notice that a filter is coming on? When a judgment starts to appear. So just pause yourself and step away. It's a filter in action. You're going to receive the communication. What's actually being communicated here? And you can actually look at your own filters that you've created, by going back into your life and notice what's actually being communicated. That's the redemption. The eighth deadly sin. The eighth deadly sin is consumption rather than creation. The Creator planted us in His own light as creators. We are natural born creators. So creation comes naturally to us. When we are in creation, we experience deep fulfillment. So, given that that is what the experience is of being in creation, consumption, on the other hand, provides instant gratification. But it isn't necessarily fulfilling. In a relationship, consumption in a relationship initially it feels great, like you might have experienced it in certain relationship that you might have had, where the person just totally loved you and just wanted you and wanted you, and you were the person that this person totally truly loved, and it felt wonderful. You allowed yourself to be consumed in that relationship, and after a while it starts consuming you, and it becomes sticky, and it becomes, oh my God, I just can't handle this. I'm dealing with someone right now where she couldn't believe she's actually met this person who loves her for who she is without any judgment. She just felt so seen and so received by this person. And literally 4 months later, she's into, I can't do anything. I'm feeling so stifled. I can't do anything. I can't even talk about what my vision is, because all that this person wants to talk about, how cute I am or how good I look. And, it's like, I can't have any meaningful conversation. And then she's gotten into, like, 4 weeks later, she's like, I can't leave him because he says that he's going to die if I leave him. So now she's truly being consumed by this relationship. And a part of her is like, I never experienced this kind of love and connection in my life before. And now it's like everywhere. It's like intertwined, it's like a twine that's just wrapped around me. I can't get over it. All you are to do, the redemption of consumption, is is creation. So find somewhere or something that you can start engaging in creation and get those creation juices flowing. And the moment so she can't be creative. She thought maybe she can co-create a new way in which they relate to one another. But the originating foundation of this relationship was consumption based, and the other person feels very misled by her because his thing is that, I thought you really loved it. I said, well, I did, but I want to also just sit down and have a talk about things, what I believe in, what I stand for. And he goes into, I just love listening to you talking. No, you're not listening. You're seeing something else. So she took on writing a book, which is something that she had begun some time ago, but then had no time to do it. She applied her creative energies to writing a book. And finally, she's chosen to move on, not ending the relationship in catastrophe, but actually communicating with love, honoring how wonderful so many aspects of this relationship are. And however wonderful it may be, it is not the one for her. Encouraging this person to move on into another phase of their life. The ninth deadly sin is uncommitted complaining. Where you're complaining left, right, and center, not to the person who can do anything about the complaint. You're just complaining. Rather than, and this is the redemption. The redemption is connection to resolve. What are you resolved about in your life? And if you don't have something that you can recall, you are as a human really about coming alive. So you can take on your resolve to come alive. Uncommitted complaining does not bring you alive. Uncommitted complaining basically simply is complaining without having any intention or commitment to resolving that complaint. So you go around complaining to people that can't do anything about it. Like so often we complain about the government or the policies or the state of the world. I mean, hey, what are you resolved about? How does that make you come alive? You know, who are you? Can this person that you're complaining about the state of the world to, can they do anything about it? So why are you indulging in it? Destroys relationships completely. I mean, there's someone who just got, I know, who got so caught up in this conspiracy theory stuff that was going on, like so caught up in it. And he would talk to people about it. And then when people weren't listening, he would be complaining about it to such an extent that he literally started depleting the vital life force from his internal organs until he passed away in his early 40s. It truly is a deadly sin, uncommitted complaining. It's not a laughing matter. It's a habit that people adopt. Connect to what you're resolved about. That is the redemption. And a resolve, if you don't have anything like I have, it is to come alive. As a human being, your only purpose to life is to come alive. You can get resolved about that. Experience of uninterrupted, frictionless flow of yumminess as you move in the direction of coming alive. Over to you, Catherine. We did it.
I can't believe you pulled that off. I love this. The last thing you just said, the yumminess. This was such a juicy pearl of wisdom. Well, actually, not a pearl of wisdom tonight. We'll be back to our pearl of wisdoms next week, but a nugget of wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing this. I love the unfulfilled expectations. If we're feeling that, means something about unsaid communications. I think I need to unpack that. I think we all can probably clean up our past a little bit, some of that stickiness. But thank you all for being here. And Mynoo, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know everyone got so much out of this. These 9 deadly sins are making a whole lot more sense now. And we look forward to having you all right here next week at same place, same time. Will we be back for a Pearl of Wisdom, Mynoo, or does
Yes,
that
it's
remain?
Pearl of Wisdom next week.
Great.
Yes.
So 90-second pearl of wisdom. We will see you here next week. And thank you again for that beautiful nugget of wisdom, Mynoo.
Namaste.